Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, Jeff Currier, and Royce Coop, where we break down the stories shaping our country.
Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. Gentlemen, it is Friday when we tape this, and just recently, President Donald Trump tweeted out on Truth Social that he had a great conversation with Prime Minister, not Governor, Prime Minister Carney, and he is very excited about the future for the United States of America and Canada. This is a major turn in events that I think puts Carney in a very different light.
Well, it's a major turn in rhetoric, but it's Donald Trump. And if his website is called Truth, I mean, that's an oxymoron to begin with. Why anybody in Canada or the United States, especially in Canada, would take anything Donald Trump says at face value is a mystery to me, because nothing he says can be taken at face value. Now, my concern about what he was saying is that it implies an endorsement of Mark Carney going into this election. And in my mind, that constitutes foreign interference in our election. It's a deliberate attempt to influence the outcome of our election. Which way it's intended, who knows?
That's quite a statement, though, Jeff. That's right. A big statement.
Okay, but because if Donald Trump is endorsing a candidate for the prime ministership of this country, that constitutes foreign interference. Now, does he really want Mark Carney to win this election? Because Donald Trump must surely be aware that if he was running for prime minister in Canada, he would garner no more than about 15% of the popular vote. Does he really want Mark Carney to win, or is he trying to sabotage him? Either way, he should not be commenting on our federal election any more than our prime minister would comment on an American federal election. This is election interference.
But we did. I mean, there was afterwards that Trudeau commented after Trump won, so I will say that. But there was comments made about when he was running for office. There was politicians in Manitoba that made comments about the fact that he might win the election. So a lot to unpack there. And I'm not disagreeing with you, but Royce, is from a political science perspective, you are a political science professor. Could this be deemed as interference?
Yeah, I mean, interference has a kind of formal legal definition, but then it has a kind of broader definition, and I mean, it's certainly unwelcome. We don't want foreigners, foreign leaders interfering in our elections, kind of sticking their noses into our internal politics, especially when it's the United States. It has such an important impact on the country, jobs, the economy. This is kind of an interesting thing. I think on one hand, you could interpret Trump's statement as an endorsement of Carney. He wants Carney to be elected. He wants him to be the prime minister after this election for whatever reason. It might just be that, which is something that you would think Carney would not welcome. Trump's endorsement is not a good thing for politicians right now. Or it can be something that Carney's going to spin as, he convinced Trump. He's presented the strong arguments. He strong-armed the strong man. He got his way on Canada's behalf. And so now we're probably in a bit of a spin war between the parties. How is this going to get spun? Is this a great triumph for Carney? Or are we starting to get an indication that Trump actually wants Carney? And if that's the case, and if that starts to seep into the public consciousness, that's a problem. We probably don't want the candidate that Trump wants.
Yeah, but every media outlet, I think, across Canada, with the exception of us right now and the Winnipeg Sun, which is independently owned, but it seems to me that we've wanted this election to be about Trump. The Liberal Party has made it about Trump. I've said before, I think the Liberal Party loves the idea that there's a tariff thing going on right now. Look at what it has done for them when they brought Carney on as the leader. So I guess it's one thing to say, here's Trump getting involved in the election, and I'm not sticking up for him in any way. I'm trying to give this a different perspective here. Is that how can we blame him for saying, oh, I look forward to working with Carney, yet we're making him the center point of this election anyways? With the tariffs, it's all about Trump. It's all about Trump. Every party now is talking about Trump. You got Wab Kinew, the premier of Manitoba, for whatever reason, thinking that he's the prime minister of Canada, doing announcements with giant flags behind him. It's all about going after Trump and the tariffs. So did we not? Are we not the ones? Like, we didn't ignore Trump. We made him the spotlight. And so is it wrong for him to come out and say, hey, yeah, you know what? I had a good conversation with Carney. And I'm not endorsing Carney in any way, shape, or form or anybody.
No, I think Canada has been drawn into the vortex of this tariff conversation My guess is that tariffs are going to last a shorter period of time than COVID did.
I
And I
disagree
think we,
100%.
you disagree?
Yeah, I
I,
think that
I think,
Trump's
I think,
made it. Let me tell you
I think
why.
this,
Just to be in fairness, let me
okay.
tell you why. Because Trump has made a commitment to get rid of income tax in the United States. And the way to replace that revenue is to put tariffs on. So, yes, products might be a little more expensive. But if you were to say to the general population, you no longer have to pay income tax, you're just going to pay a little more. It's a goods and services tax. Call it what you want. But at the end of the day, from an economic standpoint, tariffs are a goods and services tax without calling it the GST. So I think his plan is to do what he said, eliminate income tax for 150,000 and under. I don't know what president comes in after him and wins an election by saying, I'm going to get rid of tariffs and you're going to start paying income tax.
Well, tariffs generally don't work. We know that.
Yeah.
And you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And I think Canadians need to take a much longer view of this. Let's suppose you're right, Kevin, and the tariffs are going to be in place long term. How do we deal with that economically, internally then? How are we going to cope with that? And I think that's the longer view that we need to be taking. Donald Trump is going to be gone in less than 4 years. We know that. Even if the tariffs do hang around, okay, how do we deal with that then? How are we going to grow our economy internally? How do we change our trading patterns? To whom will we now turn to do most of our trading? I think that's the kind of stuff that we need to be hearing in this federal election campaign, not just who's going to get along with Donald or who's going to fight with Donald or who's going to win the tariff war with Donald. How are we going to cope with this then? If the tariffs go away, what do we do to grow our economy and reduce our national debt? If the tariffs stay in place, as you've suggested, Kevin, and they may well, what do we do about that? How do we run our economy? Who do we trade with? All of those questions need to be answered. And I think we're taking, when I say we, generally in Canada, we're taking a far too myopic view of this election campaign.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We need to have bigger conversations, more difficult conversations about how we respond to this and how we should have preemptively responded to it over the last 10 years, these lost 10 years under a liberal government. You're saying we're obsessed with Trump. Yeah, I mean, if you watch the CBC, if you listen to liberal politicians, if you listen to some of the premiers, absolutely. But when we actually poll Canadians and ask them, what's your top priority in this election, it's actually not Trump and tariffs. It is the cost of living and the economy. It's inflation. Like, people are still concerned about those things. So there is an opportunity here, but yeah, we're getting it's just noise in your face all day long. Trump, tariffs, tariffs. It's kind of hard to see how we can even change the channel between now and election day in such a short campaign.
But here's the reality, for me anyways, and I have a column in the Winnipeg Sun about this. You can see it on my website on X, where I talk about if you really want to get serious about what's happening and you really want to change and turn Canada around, you have to change the tax system in Canada. We tax businesses more than most countries. We're pushing business away. Look at how much we've lost in, investments over the years. Look at the capital investment in Canada has left in the hundreds of billions of dollars. That's where this starts. It doesn't start by walking around saying we're going to give a 15% tax cut to the lower income or middle income. That's meaningless to me. It really is. You have to change the entire tax structure. And I haven't heard any politician come forward and say, look, we have to get serious about this. If we want to live without the United States, and I think, Jeff, you asked all the right questions. That's what we should be talking about. And if we do want to do that, it's not about finding another trading partner. We're never going to find another trading partner as big as the United States for what we have and getting it to them cheap because it's right there. It's right across the fence. But we have to find a way to attract more business to Canada. We've lost so much business in the last 9 years. We've lost capital investment. We've lost. And all we're hearing from any of these political leaders right now in trying to get our vote is, a 15% tax cut here, a little tax cut there, the same old nonsense. We need real change right now. And I think it's going to have to come in our tax structure to get businesses back.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point, Kevin. Since 2012, Canada has lost 5% of its head offices.
Jeez.
They've left the country. They've either merged or they've left the country. That's not a good sign. that says that this is, and I know people say, oh, well, it's only a handful of people working in those offices. That's not the point. I mean, locally, it's important to have those people because they tend to be high income earners. They pay a lot of taxes. They generate a lot of economic activity. But as much as anything else, it's a sign that Canada is not seen as a place that is friendly to do business and grow the economy. And we've said this before. We can't all work for the government. You know, I've used this joke before, that the old economist joke that if we all took in each other's laundry, we'd have an economy. Right? But there's no growth there, right? And we just don't focus on that kind of growth, Kevin. You're absolutely right. And we need to make this a place where people want to come and do business. I mean, in our home province of Manitoba, in the recent budget that was released, bracket creep is back. And that means essentially a tax increase for everybody. Everybody who's going to get a pay raise this year, you're getting a tax increase because your income is no longer going to be indexed to the cost of living and inflation. And by freezing those rates, the Manitoba government, the Canoe government, has imposed a new income tax on everybody in this province who gets a raise. And that's include all of the people in the public service, most of whom vote for the NDP. Well, they've just given you a tax increase. It's an unfriendly, it's a sign that we are unfriendly to business and to economic growth.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to think about these things. There's really foundational problems with the Canadian economy that we need to address. You know, Canada made it for a very long time as a successful exporter. The hewers of wood and pumpers of water. I can't remember how that saying goes. That was predicated on the view that we would always have special access to the U.S. market. We would always be able to export to the U.S. And of course, if you know anything about U.S. history, it's like once every couple of decades, the U.S. goes through a big maybe more than that, but they go through a big protectionist phase. And Canadian politicians, our leaders, should have known that this was coming eventually and start to safeguard us against that. And that might mean, you know, opening a country up to new export markets to the extent that's even possible. But there's other things that should be done. I agree that tax competitiveness is a big thing. We need more research and development in this country. There's all sorts of things. And these are the kinds of conversations that some premiers are having now. I agree that, you know, it's an election campaign, so you're going to get kind of silly discussions about things. But in the provinces, we're actually getting some really good discussions about how to transform the resource development, the Canadian economy to confront this new threat.
Give me an example.
There's new gold mine opening up in northern Manitoba.
Gold mine's been announced 5 times.
Yeah. No.
So, you know, it's like, honestly, right? Like, let's be honest. It's been there for a while. It's been announced 5 times. You got the Canoe government.
Several provinces have announced that they are going to be working in this direction. Now, we should have been doing it years ago. And I think you've made that point before, Kevin, that exploiting our natural resources is something that should have been done a long time ago to a greater extent. Certainly here in Manitoba, we've dropped the ball big time. Every successive government in this province has failed our mining sector, and we should be a prosperous province thanks to our mining sector, and we're just not.
Well, and what did Wab-Kadoon do? I mean, they made an announcement. I think it was Minister Moses made an announcement in front of the whole mining community in Manitoba that we're going to spend $1.5 million outside Canada, probably in the United States, and try to attract investment into the mining here in Manitoba, to a room filled with people who are waiting to get permits to begin mining. So why are you putting the money there? I'm not going to beat him up for that because he took action. That's fine, Premier. But at the end of the day, you are in a room with hundreds of people that are ready to go. So why wasn't your announcement is we're going to spend $1.5 million here locally to get those permits done in the next 30 days so you can start? We know that the CO Silica project, right? That's worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. They're not talking about that. Could it be done right? Can we find a different way? I think there is a way. I mean, I was involved as the environment minister. I was one who didn't approve it right away. But I mean, there are ways there. I find that. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Royce, but I mean, what I'm hearing from premiers is talk. I'm not seeing anything. Like we're spending millions, the Canadian government's spending millions on billboards in the United States to say tariffs are bad. They don't care. They're not going to
Yeah,
change his mind.
Yeah, I haven't been a big fan of Doug Ford. I think that some of the announcements that we've seen from the Premier of Nova Scotia, even from BC, there's been some good and bad stuff coming out of there. But really, in Canada, we need to change our whole mentality about natural resource, about the economic development. You take CO silica, for a very long time, well, for at least a decade in this country, we've had the view that these sorts of things are nice to have. They're not need to have. And, they can be overruled on the basis of environmental concerns. Well, they're not nice to have. They're need to have. We need to have these projects. We need to have these developments. And the onus should be on our leaders to figure out how to make them work. And that's what Trump is showing us, is that we need to have these things in place for the future.
And
I
boy,
can tell you that
you want to make
I
our
have.
First Nations more prosperous.
Yeah.
If you want to make Manitoba's First Nations more prosperous, that's the best path. I mean, another casino is not the best way to do it. Right? Let's get people to work and working on our natural resource sector.
Well, I mean, we have to be honest too that they've already drilled in that area for sand, and they have sand sitting there that they've drilled that was done through the in the past years, and it's sitting there, and apparently it's like $7 to $10 million US worth of sand sitting in a pile blowing away because the government of Manitoba won't let them sell it. So there's a concern there, right? I mean, let's start looking at that kind of stuff. But when we talked about the premiers doing stuff, I want to mention this to you because it really bothers me, and I'm probably going to get beat up for this, but I don't care. Danielle Smith is getting smacked around. That's a bad term to use, especially because I lost my mom to domestic violence. But she is getting beat up in the media and by the left for talking to Donald Trump, trying to be democratic, trying to take a more cordial approach. And she's being vilified. But Carney has a conversation with him, and he's made out to be a hero. How do they justify this?
Well, you can't. It's there. We know there's a great amount of media bias towards Danielle Smith. My advice to Smith would be to sit things out for the next month, solely because it plays into a narrative, a federal liberal narrative about her that they can then connect to Poilievre. But yeah, it's absolutely a double standard. I think Smith is doing what she should be doing for her province, but on a purely political basis, I would back off if I was her.
Yeah, the federal election campaign is not a time for premiers or provincial politicians to be weighing in or taking sides. Gary Dewar was the smart guy in those days when a federal election would come along and everybody would say, well, who are you supporting? He said, look, I'm going to have to work with whoever is on Sussex Drive. Well, of course, it's not Sussex Drive anymore, whatever's going to happen to that place. But whoever is in government in Ottawa, I'm going to have to work with. So, why pick sides? Why get into a fight, a preemptive fight with somebody that you might have to do business with for the next 4 years? So I think Royce's point is great. It's good advice, not just for Danielle Smith, but for all the premiers.
So when it comes to the premiers, though, are we seeing enough from like you talked about Doug Ford? Now Doug Ford has come out and said he's going to fight like he's never fought before. This is after saying he's going to put a 25% tariff in and then taking that tariff off. So I agree that, Royce, your advice is right. They should all just back away and stay out of it. Can that happen in this election? Do you think that will happen? Will they take that advice?
Probably not, because they're politicians. Doug Ford, the whole electricity thing's going to cut off electricity, and he changed his mind an hour or two later. That was a total debacle. That hurt our position, hurt our bargaining position. He should absolutely back off this right now. If premiers want to say anything, they should be talking about how they're going to improve our prospects moving forward in their provinces. I wouldn't be volunteering in this right now. Canadians have a right to have an election campaign, to have a clear choice in this federal election without foreign actors or actors from other levels of government kind of sticking their noses in and kind of messing with the process. And that's what's happened so far.
All right. Is it too late for the narrative to become more clear? Or is the noise about Mark Carney being popular with Donald Trump, or Mark Carney's popularity coming really out of nowhere? Is it too late? Has this been decided? I mean, we're still a month away, and of course, as we know in politics, a month can be a very long time. a month ago, it looked like Pierre Poilievre was going to waltz into power.
Yeah.
Things
Yeah.
can change in a hurry.
So how do you
Campaign.
explain, sorry, Royce, how do you explain then, like Pierre Poilievre packing the rooms whenever he goes somewhere, right? In the small town Canada or even in the large centers, he seems to be drawing very big crowds. But when you look at what's happening on social media, you look at the polls, you look at what's happening, even in the media, it doesn't seem that has any meaning whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, we can't deny that Carney is ahead. There's been many polls now that are demonstrating this. Like, this is just the reality. But the one problem for the Liberals and a good thing for the Conservatives is that the support that Pierre has built for the party is pretty rock solid. Those are convinced voters. They are going to come hell or high water. They're going to go vote for Conservatives in this election campaign. Carney's support is much more iffy. They're much more tentative. They're not as solid. They're still open to being convinced. And so that liberal lead could evaporate under the right circumstances. I actually think that kind of explains why Pierre is getting these massive turnouts at rallies. Like, his supporters really like him. They're really going to go vote for him, whereas he's still behind in the overall polls.
I think I'm going
And
to
But
say
how
this
much?
before Jeff Courier says it. The best way to maybe make this election change is for Singh to step down and put a new NDP leader in really fast.
Probably not going to happen, but it'll happen the day after the election, no doubt. How much of Pierre Poilievre's popularity over the last couple of years has been based on the fact that he's not Justin Trudeau?
Mm. Yep.
Yeah, it's a big part of it. I mean, it's undeniable. As soon as Trudeau stepped down, the Liberal Party began to go up in the polls. I think that Conservatives need to not light their hair on fire right now. Like, yeah, they're behind in the polls, but campaigns can change things. We actually saw just yesterday there was a poll that was leaked, and this high-profile conservative strategist was criticizing the national campaign, saying they need to change focus. They need to focus more on Trump. Well, I can tell you, this is how Tories lose. Tories do not. They lose when they fall apart, when they lose discipline, when the Tory syndrome takes over, when they start firing inwards, throwing dinner buns at each other. This is how the party loses. If Poilievre has a shot to win this, there's still a month. Carney is a pretty untested candidate. There's lots of opportunities. But if the party is going to lose, it's going to be because of this. They start to lose discipline. They start to fall apart. We've seen it countless times throughout Canadian history, and we're seeing it right now before our eyes.
Well, if you look at any of the mainstream media, television, let's talk about, I don't see any pundits on any of these programs, their news programs, or when they talk politics that are pro Poilievre anymore, right? You've got Thomas Mulcair, who is a big Carney supporter. So, I mean, that's a big NDP shift going to Carney. And I'll say it again, I've said it before, that's where I think his boost is coming from, right? People are jumping the NDP ship and getting onto the Carney bandwagon, and that's where his win is coming. So I really again will point back to, it seems like other people are controlling the narrative, and I want to touch on this because we have to talk about the fact that, let's go back to the very start when we said Trump was getting involved. I think there's other people getting involved in this campaign, even within our own country, that are putting out the narrative that they want Canadians to buy. And I am at a loss in how to change that.
I don't know that you can. There are people who have a vested interest in preserving the status quo. People in the print media in Canada receive subsidies from the federal government. The CBC receives all of its money virtually from the federal government. And there are a lot of people who have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo.
Yeah, but if you're a conservative right now, the way you change it is by stop watching the news, stop looking at polls, stop accepting the narrative, and go and knock on doors. That's how the election is going to be won. A good example of what you just described, Kevin, is the way that the NDP is being portrayed in this election campaign. NDP numbers everyone's talking about Poilievre's numbers. Singh's numbers are so bad right now. This could be the worst outcome for the NDP since the 90s, since 1993, when Audrey McLaughlin was the leader. They could well lose official party status in this election. And no one is really talking about that. The NDP, very successful here in Manitoba, in the provinces. They're about to face what looks like Armageddon in this election, and facing years of rebuilding. And no one is really talking about that at all.
Interesting times. That's for sure. We'll see how the 4 weeks play out.